All right. Today we are going to talk about in-text citations. So, right now in Mr. Roberts' class, you are working on MLA format at the end of the paper. So, he might call it a works cited, he might call it a bibliography, he might just call it MLA format. That's at the end of the paper. And so, in order for that stuff at the end of the paper to make sense, you need to cite it inside your text, because if it's not there, then that means that you're not giving credit to the person or to the people that did that research and wrote that stuff down and allowed you to have it and read it, okay? So, in-text citation is where you as a writer, you directly put where you found the information into your actual essay, into your writing, into your text. And what it does is it allows a reader to know what source it came from. So that way, they can see the source in the paper and then go back to your works cited at the end and go, okay, there's the actual link that they got it from. Because in your paper, you don't want to put like an entire web address. You don't want to, do those kind of things. You instead want to just put the author so then they can go look for the author in the back of your paper and then call it a day, okay? So another reason that you do this is because you don't want it to be considered plagiarizing. Plagiarizing is where you take someone else's idea and you don't give them credit for it. And you got to give them credit where credit is due. So please make sure that anything that is not your own information and anything that is not common knowledge, you are citing. So basically any of the research that you have done, whether it be statistics, expert opinion, or a story that's not your own, you need to cite it, okay? So, with that being said, there's a couple different ways that you can do it in a text. The first way over here is quoting it, and this one is called an indirect quote, and I'm going to go over what each of those are here. So, if you are quoting directly in the text, that means that you are taking from that website, taking from that book, wherever you're getting it from, and you are quoting it word for word. The general rule of thumb is about 4 words is, you need to cite, or more than 4 words, not including words like a and the and stuff like that, like those little words. Any 4 big words that are in the same order, you need to quote directly, okay? So this part right here is the exact quote that I took from a site, and I put this part down here. Now, that part down here has a couple different things. I'm going to try moving that real quick. There we go. Okay, so notice right here, like normally you would do a couple things with quotations. If you were doing dialogue, like in your narrative, you would put a comma there. If it were just a sentence, a normal sentence, you would put a period there. So, as the rule is here, unless there is an exclamation point or a question mark right there, you get rid of it or you leave it blank, okay? So there is that, like right there, okay? Now, this Smith 38 part here, this is a couple different things. The first part here is the Smith. Smith is the last name of the author. Okay? So when you find the author and you find his or her last name, yeah, put it in there. The 38 here is the page number that it came from. So this came from a book, or it came from a research essay, or it came from a journal article. It came from something. And so that's where that 38 comes from. Now, a lot of what you guys and girls found this time around was from websites. Was from articles on websites or from web pages themselves. Web pages do not have page numbers. So if there is no page number, you just leave that blank and you just put Smith and you put the parentheses right there, and then you move that period over as well, obviously, okay? So if there is no page number, you just leave it blank. Now, let's say you do something like this. Let's say you, instead of just giving a quote and giving the name at the end, you say, according to Dr. John Smith, and something along with that I kind of went over in class, but it's not on here, is if you're going to give someone's name, I would also give their job title. So Dr. John Smith, or according to John Smith, comma, doctor at Stanford University, comma, and then you give us the quote. Okay? If you do that, if you give the name before you give the quote, then you don't have to do this part right here. It would just be 38. And if it's from a website and you don't have a page number, then you would just put the period up here. Okay? So that is if you are quoting it directly. Now, if there is no author, but there's an organization, so if it's the name of a company, the name of an organization, for example, Brian and Gavin are both doing Casey's General Store and Subway. I'm guessing that on their website, it doesn't tell you who writes all the information about Subway and about Casey's, because they just hire someone who works for them, and they go and they write it, and they call it a day. The author is not important. The important part is that it is representing the company of Subway or Casey's. If you're going to use Iowa pork producers, if you're going to use, the PETA or NRA or whatever it is, chances are they're not going to have an author for each of their articles, and so you'll just put the organization name instead, which would be PETA, which would be the NRA, etc., okay? Now, if there is no author or no organization, then you put the title of the piece. But I'd be a little weary of that, because if no one is claiming credit for it, then it might not be the best. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, over here is the indirect quote. So you are taking what this quote says, but you're putting it into your own words. So right here, instead of going to a doctor right away, a recent study found that 37% of Americans are now turning to the internet for medical information. Took what this said over here, and it flipped it around, and maybe didn't put in the 2007. It didn't say American adults. It just said Americans. Or they saw it. So this is saying turning to the internet instead of finding over here. They didn't even put before consulting a doctor. They just said for medical information, those kind of things. So it's the same information, just written differently. You're summarizing it. You're only taking the parts out that you need. You still got to give them credit, because it's still their information. Whether or not you quoted it directly, that's not the point. The point is you took it, you got to give credit. So again, Smith 38. Now, the same rules apply over here. So like if you said according to Dr. John Smith, you would still do that same stuff. If it's just a website, you wouldn't put the 38. So the same rules from over here apply over here. So one of the things that you need to do is just make sure that you are doing this as you write. So what I would do is I would go back through, and anything that is not, any piece of your evidence that has not been cited yet, I would make sure that it's cited, okay? And all the explanatory sentences, the ones that you put in your own thoughts and your own feelings and you explain things, that doesn't need to be cited, because that's your own words, that's your own thoughts. You don't need to cite that, okay? You're taking details and explaining them. That's your own stuff, and that's good. That's what we want, okay? All right, if you have any questions, please shoot me an email.